In a glowing church filled with song, a little girl in red ran to a stranger. "Please be my daddy," she whispered. The whole town watched. His next move stunned everyone. The wind whipped down Main Street, dragging snow across the dark asphalt like scattered ash. In the driver's seat of a sleek black SUV, Graham Whitaker sat motionless, hands gripping the leather steering wheel as if the world outside might break in. The engine hummed softly, casting a low warmth, but inside him, there was only cold. Outside, storefronts sparkled with tinsel and golden lights. Children ran across icy sidewalks with candy canes in hand. Somewhere nearby, carolers sang off-key but with heart, their voices rising into the brittle winter air. Graham didn't hear them. Or rather, he didn't want to. He hadn't planned to stop in Willow Creek. Hell, he hadn't even planned to be in Maine. He had simply kept driving after a board meeting in Boston, hoping that if he stayed in motion long enough, the memories might not catch him. But they always did. Tonight, it was the song playing low from a passing speaker, "Oh, Holy Night." He couldn't change the station fast enough. Not that it mattered. Nothing could silence Leah's voice in his head, or the echo of Lily's giggle from the back seat of a car that never made it to the tree lighting 2 years ago. He swallowed hard and made a right turn without thinking. The tires crunched against snow-packed cobblestone as he entered the historic district. That's when he saw it, an old stone church at the top of the hill, its stained glass windows glowing like fire against the night. Something pulled him. Not religion, not nostalgia, something older, quieter. He parked across the street and stepped out, the cold slapping him instantly. The sharp scent of pine and chimney smoke filled his nose. Snowflakes landed silently on his wool coat and silver-streaked hair. He didn't bother brushing them off. As he approached the church, he caught a sound that stopped him mid-step. Children's voices, singing. Imperfect, raw, beautiful. The notes spilled into the cold air like a secret. He pushed the heavy wooden door open and slipped inside. The warmth hit him first, then the light, then the laughter. Inside, the sanctuary had been transformed into something magical. Strings of warm yellow bulbs draped across the ceiling beams. Folding chairs lined up in crooked rows. Near the altar, a small choir of children stood in scattered formation, some holding wrinkled sheet music, others giggling between verses. They were practicing, clearly, but not perfectly. A woman stood at the front, her voice rising above theirs like a thread pulling them together. "Okay, my stars," she called, not yelling but glowing somehow. From the top. This time, sing like you're lighting up the sky. She was younger than Graham expected, early 30s maybe, golden hair tied back loosely, soft navy sweater and boots worn down from use. Her tone was gentle, but her presence filled the space. Graham found himself leaning against the back pew, watching. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the warmth. Maybe it was the ache. Maybe it was that he hadn't felt anything in so long. The piano began. "Oh, Holy Night," of course. Of all the songs. The notes twisted around his ribs like barbed wire. He turned to leave, but then a flash of red caught his eye. A little girl stood front and center in the choir, her red velvet dress too big for her, the hem brushing the tops of her sparkly snow boots. Her brown curls bounced as she sang, eyes closed, face tilted upward like she was singing to the stars themselves. But then her voice wavered, her eyes opened, and she saw him. In the next moment, the music kept playing, but she wasn't singing anymore. She stepped down from the riser, then walked, then ran. Graham blinked. She ran faster, small arms pumping. He barely had time to react before she reached him. The girl flung her arms around his waist and pressed her cheek into his coat like she'd known him forever. He froze. His breath stuck somewhere between disbelief and heartbreak. She looked up at him with eyes too wide, too knowing. Her voice was a whisper, but somehow cut through everything. "Please be my daddy," she said. "I saw you in my dream last night." The room fell utterly silent. For a full second, Graham didn't move. Couldn't. Something inside him, something rusted shut, creaked open in that moment. Not all the way. Not yet. But it was enough to shake him. He looked down at her, stunned. And then, footsteps behind. "Ellie!" The woman from the front called, rushing forward, her voice catching. She reached them quickly, her cheeks flushed with cold and something else. Embarrassment, maybe fear. "I'm so sorry," she said, gently tugging the girl back. She dreams a lot. Makes up stories." Graham said nothing. Couldn't. "She's not usually like this," the woman continued. "We've been working on boundaries." But the little girl, Ellie, turned to her mother. "But Mommy, I saw him. Last night. In the snow. He smiled at me." Claire, the woman's name he would learn later, swallowed hard and tried to smooth things over. But the damage, or miracle, had already been done. Ellie still looked back at Graham as she was led away. Her hand reached out for a moment, then dropped. Graham stayed frozen in the same spot, heart pounding against a chest that hadn't held anything for years. He didn't know what this was. A mistake, a coincidence, a cruel joke from the universe. But something in that girl's voice, something in the way she said "daddy," like it wasn't a wish but a fact, stayed lodged in his throat like a prayer he didn't know how to say. He didn't stay for the rest of the rehearsal, but he didn't leave either. Instead, he sat in the back pew, hands locked, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the riser where Ellie had stood. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, a stranger had just called him home. The cold had thickened by the time Graham stepped out of the church, but he barely noticed. He moved like a man half awake, crunching through untouched snow as his breath curled into the night. His pulse hadn't slowed since the moment that little girl wrapped her arms around his waist and called him daddy. Not, "Are you my dad?" Not, "I wish you were." Just a statement, a dream. And yet, it had landed in his chest like a live wire. The door behind him creaked open. "Wait!" Claire's voice called, her boots scuffing on the stone steps as she caught up. "I really am sorry about what happened back there. She's imaginative." Graham turned. The church light framed her, casting a soft halo around her face. She wasn't flustered anymore, just tired, but behind the exhaustion was something else, something maternal and unbreakable. "She dreams big," she added, offering a strained smile. "Too big sometimes." Graham shook his head slightly. "It's fine," he said, though his voice came out rough, like it hadn't been used in days. Claire shifted her weight, eyes scanning his face. "She's been asking for a dad since she could talk. And I told her sometimes people come into our lives when we least expect it. I didn't mean tonight." She gave a small laugh, but it faded fast. Graham nodded, then hesitated. "She said she saw me in a dream." Claire's smile faltered. "She says that a lot. Does she usually get it right?" Claire's eyes narrowed just slightly, then softened. "You're not from here." "No." She tilted her head. "But you stopped." Graham looked away. "Yeah, I did." Claire studied him for another beat, then nodded. "Well, Good night, Mr. Graham, he said. Just Graham. Claire, she replied, offering her name more gently now. And Ellie. I figured, he gestured toward the church. She's memorable. Claire smiled again, genuinely this time. She's everything. He watched her turn and walk back toward the glowing church doors. For a moment, he thought about calling after her, asking something, anything, but he didn't. Instead, he walked back to the SUV parked beneath the old lamppost, its windows now coated with snow crystals. He slid inside, started the engine, but didn't drive. The dashboard clock blinked 8:41. Christmas music drifted faintly from the radio. Instrumental. Safe. He turned it off. In the silence, he saw her. Not Ellie. Leah, his wife's face flickered behind his closed eyelids. The last time she sang "O Holy Night" was in their old house, barefoot in the kitchen, flour on her nose. Lily, their daughter, had been twirling in sparkly pajamas, pretending the dog was a reindeer. He had watched from the hallway, arms crossed, BlackBerry in hand, too busy to join in. That was the night before he missed Lily's kindergarten play. He had told Leah he couldn't reschedule the pitch, meeting with investors. I'll record it for you, she had said, kissing his cheek with a look that was more tired than angry. But she never got the chance. The next day, they were both gone. A winter storm, a reckless driver, a single call from the police while Graham was still stuck in that damned glass conference room, arguing over market share. The SUV's heater hummed louder. He realized he was gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He forced himself to let go. He drove without knowing where he was going, winding through the unfamiliar streets of Willow Creek until he found a small rental cabin he'd passed earlier. It was perched on a wooded ridge with only one porch light glowing. He parked, trudged inside, and collapsed into the worn leather armchair beside the fireplace. The silence was almost unbearable. He looked around at the bare cabin walls, the cold fireplace, the untouched bed. Then, out of habit more than desire, he opened the minibar and poured himself a glass of scotch. His hand trembled slightly, just enough to rattle the ice. He lifted the glass, but before he could drink, his elbow brushed against something resting on the arm of the chair. He turned and froze. Ellie's scarf, red, knitted, with one thread slightly frayed at the end. He must have brought it with him, clutched it in his hand the whole time without realizing. Graham stared at the scarf like it was a ghost. Then slowly, deliberately, he set the glass down, untouched. He reached for the scarf, held it in both hands, and brought it to his lap. He should throw it away, return it tomorrow, if he even stayed in town that long. But instead, he folded it with the same care he once used when packing Lily's lunchbox. His fingers brushed the stitches. It smelled like cinnamon and snow and something faintly floral, something maternal. Claire's perfume, maybe. He sat like that for a long time, elbows on knees, the scarf resting between his palms. And then, he did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed. Not with words, not out loud. Just a whisper inside his chest, somewhere beneath the grief and the guilt and the silence. A whisper that sounded like, "Why her? Why now? Why did she see me in her dream?" And for the first time since the accident, Graham didn't chase the question away. He just sat there, listening. Morning in Willow Creek came softly. Pale light seeped through the pine trees dusted with snow, and the town square stirred with the slow rhythm of early December. Graham sat in his rental SUV once again, the red scarf folded on the passenger seat beside him, like a silent invitation he still didn't know how to answer. He hadn't planned on coming back, Not after the way last night left him cracked open and exposed, but as he sat watching the steam rise from a bakery window, he realized that something in him had already returned. He just hadn't caught up to it yet. He parked near the church around 9 a.m., surprised by how natural his feet moved up the old steps again. Inside, the sanctuary was empty now, the magic of the night before replaced by dust motes and silence. But down the hallway, he heard faint music, off-key, hopeful, human. He followed the sound into a low-ceilinged room off the side of the church. Fluorescent lights flickered above a mismatched set of chairs and tables where children huddled around juice boxes and crayons. The piano sat in the corner, slightly out of tune, with its bench pushed askew. Claire stood near the front, balancing sheet music in one arm and a stack of glitter glue in the other, looking every bit the exhausted but determined conductor of organized chaos. Graham cleared his throat gently. Claire looked up, surprised. "You came back." He nodded once, unsure of the protocol for moments like these. "I believe this belongs to someone," he said, holding up the scarf. A voice shot across the room before she could reply. "Mr. Graham." Ellie bounded from her chair, crayon still in hand, face lit up like the star on top of a Christmas tree. She ran to him, arms flung wide again, though this time she stopped just short of hugging him, almost like she was checking to see if it was okay. He knelt and offered the scarf. "I think you dropped this." Ellie snatched it joyfully, hugging it to her chest. "I knew you'd come back," she said, beaming. Claire approached, a trace of wariness still in her eyes, but something gentler layered beneath it now. "Thank you for the scarf, and for not disappearing." Graham shrugged lightly. Didn't have anywhere more important to be. Claire raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "A man like you? I doubt that." He didn't reply. Instead, his eyes scanned the room. "You do this every day?" 3 days a week. It's our community choir. Kids from all over town. We rehearse for the Christmas Eve concert. And the rest of the week?" She tilted her head. "I'm a music teacher at the elementary school, and I pick up extra shifts at the diner when I can." He nodded slowly. "Busy life." "It's a good one," she said, but her tone carried the wear of someone who repeated that phrase more as reassurance than conviction. A few kids started banging on the piano keys. Claire gently pulled them away. "Go wash your hands before snack." "Time, please!" Ellie tugged at Graham's coat. "Want to see what I drew?" "Sure," he said, standing. She led him to her little folding table covered in coloring books and glitter. She held up a piece of paper with 3 stick figures, one with curly hair and a red dress, one with yellow hair and a music note on her shirt, and one tall figure with square shoulders and a smile. Above them floated the words, "My family," in big, uneven letters. "That's you," Ellie said, pointing at the tall one. "I didn't draw your face yet. I didn't know if you'd stay." Graham's throat tightened. "Well," he said quietly, "maybe next time you can." Claire stood behind them, watching. She said nothing, but something flickered across her face, a mix of warmth and worry. Later that afternoon, Claire offered him a cup of coffee in the church kitchen while the kids rehearsed in the other room. "So, what exactly brings you to Willow Creek?" she asked, watching him over the rim of her mug. He paused before answering. "I was just driving. Got tired of cities. Needed a break." Claire smiled faintly. "You always dress that well when you take breaks?" Graham chuckled, brushing non-existent lint from his coat. Old habits die hard. They talked a little more, about the weather, the bakery down the street, How the kids each had a solo moment in the show, whether they could carry a tune or not. Nothing too deep, nothing too revealing. But the silences between words weren't strained anymore. They held something tentative, mutual curiosity. The bell rang in the hallway, signaling the end of rehearsal. Parents began trickling in. Kids gathered their coats and snacks. Ellie lingered by Graham's side, reluctant. "She gets attached fast," Claire said under her breath. "I noticed." As he slipped on his gloves, Claire asked, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you play?" She nodded toward the piano. Graham followed her gaze. "Used to." She raised an eyebrow. "Used to like college, or used to like concert halls?" "Neither. Just at home for my daughter." Claire's expression shifted. "She plays too?" "Played," he corrected gently. "She passed." The moment cracked slightly. Claire's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." Graham nodded once, eyes distant. "So am I." They stood in silence for a long beat. Finally, Claire offered, "If you ever feel like playing again, we could use a hand. The piano's temperamental, and I have more enthusiasm than skill." He glanced at her, then at Ellie, who was now showing her drawing to another child proudly. "Maybe," he said. Claire smiled, and for the first time it wasn't guarded. "Good. The music's better when someone cares how it sounds." As Graham stepped back out into the snow-covered street, the wind was still sharp, the sky still pale. But something about the day felt warmer, not because of heat, but because of color, voices, crayon drawings, red scarves. He didn't know if he belonged here, not yet, but he knew he wanted to come back. Snow fell steadily that afternoon, brushing the stained glass windows of Willow Creek Church in soft white strokes. Inside the building, the heat from the old radiator clicked and hummed, and children's laughter echoed through the narrow hallway. Graham stood in the doorway of the choir room, watching as Claire tried to juggle too many things at once. Sheet music in one hand, tuning fork in the other, and a group of fidgety kids too excited about candy canes to stay in formation. He wasn't sure what exactly made him step forward, only that he did. By the time Claire looked up from the piano and spotted him, he was already kneeling next to the broken pedal, sleeves rolled up, brow furrowed in concentration. The action was instinctive. His hands remembered how to do this, even if the rest of him hadn't touched a piano in years. "You're really doing that," Claire said from behind, more curious than surprised. Graham glanced back. "It was squeaking, and the hammers were sticking. Figured I could help." She crossed her arms, watching him from the corner of the room. "You fix pianos in your spare time?" "I used to, for my daughter." His voice was quieter now. "She thought they could talk if you played them right." Claire didn't say anything for a moment, then softly, "Sounds like she was right." He finished tightening the last screw and gently pressed the pedal with his foot. The squeak was gone. "I'll test it later," he said, rising. "Didn't mean to intrude." "You're not," Claire said. Her tone had changed, warmer, more open. "The kids love having you around, especially Ellie." Graham nodded but said nothing. Instead, he turned toward the table where Ellie was now sitting with two other kids, sipping hot cocoa and humming a song under her breath. A chocolate smudge stained the edge of her nose. "Mr. Graham," she called out. "Want to hear me sing?" He gave a small smile. "Always." She stood on her chair, despite Claire's mild protest, and began an off-key but deeply enthusiastic version of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." She sang with her whole body, arms waving like she was conducting an orchestra only she could see. When she finished, She took a deep bow and said, "I'm going to sing that in the concert." Claire laughed. "Sweetheart, that's not exactly on the program," Ellie pouted, "but it's the only one I remember." Graham walked over and knelt beside her. "Maybe we can practice together sometime. Would that help?" Ellie's eyes widened. "Like, you and me? At the piano?" "Yeah. I'll even let you press the loud keys," she gasped. "The loud ones?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure you know what you're offering?" "No," he said dryly, "but I'm already in too deep." The three of them laughed, and for a fleeting moment, the room felt like a memory Graham had never had. Warm, messy, and full of possibility. That evening, as the children began packing up their coats and artwork, Graham helped Claire stack chairs against the wall. "Thanks," she said, tucking a clipboard under her arm. "For what?" "For showing up, for fixing things, for letting her sing." He looked over at Ellie, who was chasing a friend in circles around a folding table. "She makes it easy." Claire's smile faded slightly. "That's the part that scares me." He looked at her, confused. "She's attached," Claire said quietly. "She doesn't know how to guard her heart yet. And I can't blame her. It's just been us for so long." Graham understood what she wasn't saying. He nodded slowly. "I'm not trying to replace anything." "I know," she replied. "But sometimes, just being present is enough to feel like a promise." Before he could respond, a small voice piped up behind them. "Mommy?" Ellie stood holding her coat and music folder. Her face was scrunched into that worried expression only a 5-year-old could pull off without irony. Claire crouched down. "What's wrong, baby?" "Are we still doing the Christmas show?" she whispered. Claire blinked. "Of course we are. Why do you ask?" Ellie fidgeted. "I heard you on the phone." Graham's eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing. Claire swallowed. "We're working on it." Ellie stepped closer, her voice even smaller. "Mommy said maybe dreams are too expensive this year." The room went still. Claire closed her eyes, exhaling through her nose. Graham spoke before he could stop himself. "What's going on?" Claire straightened slowly. "Our sponsor backed out, said the concert wasn't commercially engaging enough." Translation: not flashy, not loud, not profitable. Graham's jaw clenched. "So that's it? They just pulled funding?" Claire nodded. "No funds means no stage lighting, no heating, no food, no printed programs. I could scale it back, but the kids will know," Graham finished for her. Claire sighed. "They've worked so hard. For most of them, this concert is everything. And for Ellie, it's the one time of year she believes magic still works." Ellie had wandered off again, showing her drawing to another child. But Graham watched her, silent. That night, back at his cabin, he stood by the window, watching snow swirl against the pine trees. The fireplace crackled low behind him, untouched. His fingers tapped against the arm of the chair. On the table beside him sat a leather checkbook. He hadn't used it in months, but tonight it sat open. He stared at the blank space for a long time. Then, slowly, he picked up his pen. He didn't write his name. Instead, he signed it from the Lily Foundation, a name that only existed in the corners of his heart. He didn't know why he was doing this. He just knew Ellie's voice was still in his head, whispering about expensive dreams and loud keys, and somehow it all felt like music again. The next few days unfolded like snowfall, soft, quiet, but slowly building. Graham showed up each morning at the church without a word of warning. No grand gestures, no explanations, Just him slipping through the old wooden doors with a thermos of coffee in one hand and a quiet nod to Claire. At first, she watched him with curiosity, unsure what he was doing there. But after the second day, she stopped asking. Because the truth was, she didn't want him to leave. He didn't push, didn't ask for anything in return. He simply became part of the rhythm, stacking chairs before rehearsal, tuning the stubborn high keys on the piano, fixing a loose bulb on the stage light with a screwdriver he seemed to carry everywhere. The children adored him. Even the shy ones who never sang above a whisper started waving at him as they walked in. Ellie, of course, acted as though he'd always been there. Sometimes, when no one was looking, she'd slip her tiny hand into his and lean against him without a word. And Graham would hold still, like he was afraid any sudden movement might break the spell. One particularly icy morning, Claire brought in a small paper bag and handed it to him without a word. Inside were 2 homemade cranberry muffins, still warm. "From the kids," she said, though her voice had a playful edge. "Apparently, you're now an honorary music elf." Graham raised an eyebrow. "Is that a demotion or a promotion?" She smirked. "Depends on how well you sing." They sat in the pews after rehearsal that day, watching the kids play duck, duck, goose in the aisles. Claire sipped her tea while Graham carefully unwrapped the muffin and took a bite. "It's good," he said, surprised. Claire nudged him. "That's Maine cranberries, not store-bought. You're trying to win me over with regional berries? Is it working?" He gave her a rare smile, small but real. "Maybe." Their conversation that day meandered. Childhood memories, snowstorms, what it meant to be alone, what it meant to be seen. Claire didn't pry about his past, but when she mentioned that Ellie's dad had left before she was born, Graham's hand stilled on his coffee cup. He didn't say much, just nodded. But his eyes held something unspoken, a shared ache, a mirrored loss. Later that week, while the kids rehearsed "Away in a Manger," Ellie asked Graham to play with her at the piano. "Just one song," she pleaded, tugging at his sleeve. He hesitated, then sat beside her on the bench. Her feet dangled above the floor as she placed her tiny fingers on the keys. "You go first," she whispered. Graham played the first few notes of "Twinkle, Twinkle," slow and deliberate. Ellie joined in a beat later, missing half the notes but hitting all the joy. They laughed, paused, tried again. Claire watched from the back, her hands pressed to her chest. "You make the piano sound like it's smiling," Ellie told him. Graham looked at her, whispered, "So do you." That night, as the church lights dimmed and the last child's boots shuffled out into the snow, Claire was locking up when she noticed Graham still sitting in the front pew. He held something in his hands, a folded piece of paper with crayon marks and glitter. She walked up beside him. "Another masterpiece?" He handed it to her wordlessly. It was a drawing, 3 figures holding hands beneath a big yellow sun. Ellie in her red dress, Claire with a music note on her shirt, and Graham. This time his face wasn't blank. He had eyes, a smile, even his gray coat drawn with careful strokes. At the top, in crooked handwriting, "Our family." Claire's throat tightened. She looked at him, unsure of what to say. Graham didn't speak either. He just stared ahead, hands clasped, as if the drawing had pinned his soul to the pew. "I haven't seen her draw anyone that carefully since she was 3, Claire finally said. "Back then it was just stick figures and balloons." He turned toward her. "Why me?" Claire shrugged softly. "You showed up." That night, Graham took the drawing home. He didn't hang it, didn't frame it, just placed it on the mantel above the unlit fireplace. He sat in the armchair for a long time, staring at it, a single tear tracing the edge of his cheek before disappearing into the lines of his jaw. The next day, Claire found a small laminated sign on the choir room door. "Please don't eat on the piano. It's moody. Mr. Graham." She laughed out loud when she saw it, then added her own note beneath in red ink. Like most musicians, the kids loved it. They began calling him Piano Boss, but not Ellie. She still called him Mr. Graham, though she said it now with a secret softness, as if the Mr. was only there until she was allowed to call him something else. That Saturday, Claire brought him a second paper bag, this time filled with molasses cookies. "A peace offering," she said, "in case you get overwhelmed and disappear." Graham blinked. "You think I'm going to run?" Claire met his gaze. "I think you've lost something. And I think maybe you're afraid to find something new in its place." He said nothing, just opened the bag, took a bite, and replied, "Still warm." She rolled her eyes, but smiled as she turned away. That evening, as Claire turned out the last light in the sanctuary, she stood in the doorway, looking at the piano, the empty pews, and the small piece of glitter on the floor from someone's forgotten angel costume. She whispered, almost to herself, "What if this time it's real?" Outside, Graham stood by the door, scarf around his neck, gloved hands in his pockets. He didn't hear the whisper, but he felt something shift in the air between them when she stepped outside. Not a declaration, not a promise, just a shared silence. And sometimes, that's how healing begins. The day everything shifted began like any other. Snow had fallen heavy through the night, leaving Willow Creek hushed and blanketed in white. The church glowed from within, laughter bouncing down the hallways as kids rehearsed their solos, paper angel wings rustling as they moved between folding chairs and glitter-streaked tablecloths. Claire stood at the piano, tapping out a tempo with a pencil, while Ellie tried, once again, to hold her final note through the end of "O Come All Ye Faithful," and Graham, as usual, was at the back of the room with a screwdriver tucked behind one ear and a box of replacement light bulbs beside him. No one questioned his presence anymore. He belonged somehow, the way an old brick belonged to the foundation of a building. Solid, steady, unseen, but holding something together. It should have been a simple afternoon. Until Mr. Lowell Gentry, a retired accountant and longtime church treasurer, shuffled into the rehearsal with a clipboard and a puzzled look. "Claire," he said, pulling her aside near the piano. "Got a question for you about the donation." Claire raised a brow. "Which one?" "The big one. The anonymous one that saved the concert. Came through the Lilly Foundation. Ring any bells?" Claire blinked. "No, I assumed it was a local donor. Why?" Gentry held out a paper. "I did some checking, for tax records. Standard procedure. That foundation is backed by... Well, you're not going to believe this." She skimmed the page. Her eyes froze halfway down. "North Point Resorts, CEO Graham Whitaker." Her breath caught in her chest. Her mouth went dry. She read it again. Behind her, Ellie missed her cue, and the kids burst into laughter. Graham looked up, smiling, unaware of the storm that had just cracked open a few feet away. Claire didn't confront him right away. She finished rehearsal like her feet were on autopilot, moving through motions her heart wasn't part of. Her mind reeled. The pieces realigned themselves in new ways. The quiet generosity, the expensive coat, the way he watched Ellie like he was remembering something lost. She had trusted him. More than that, she had let him in. And all along, he hadn't told her who he really was. That evening, after the kids had gone home and the snow began to fall again, Claire walked into the sanctuary where Graham sat alone, cleaning dust from between the piano keys. She didn't knock. "You're Graham Whitaker," she said. Her voice was calm but clipped. "North Point CEO? Worth how many millions?" He looked up, his hands freezing over the keys. "I was wondering when that would come up. You let me think you were just some stranger passing through, some kind man who liked music and cocoa and fixing light bulbs." I never lied. "No," she said sharply, "but you never told the truth either." Graham stood slowly. "Would it have changed anything if I had?" "Yes," she said, almost without hesitation, "because I would have known the difference between a man who showed up out of kindness and one who showed up out of guilt." He flinched. The words hit harder than she intended, but she didn't take them back. "You knew who I was," she continued. "You read my name on that funding application last year. I poured my heart into that request, Graham. And it got rejected like every other one. Then you walk in here and play the piano like some wounded hero and just slide a check under the door. What is this? A redemption arc?" Graham's voice, when it came, was quiet. "I didn't come here to fix anything." "Then why did you come back?" He met her eyes, and for the first time there was no guarded look, no smooth mask, just grief. "Because I was running from a life that made me feel nothing," he said. Claire's anger faltered. Just a little. Graham stepped around the piano. "My wife, Leah, she sang in this church, once, years ago, before we were married. She said it was magic, that the acoustics made even broken voices sound whole." Claire's gaze dropped. She said nothing. "I didn't come here to tell anyone who I was," he continued. "Because for the first time in years, I didn't want to be the man who missed every birthday and holiday and bedtime. I wanted to just be." She swallowed. Her hands were shaking slightly. Graham's voice dropped. "But you're right. I did read your application, and I turned it down. Not because it wasn't good, but because I never read it all the way through. I had a stack that day. My assistant probably—" He trailed off, jaw tightening. Claire crossed her arms. "And now you're here playing savior? Hoping a check makes it okay?" "I'm not trying to be anything," he said. "But your little girl hugged me like I mattered, like she knew me. And I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't." Claire's voice cracked. "She thinks you're going to stay." "I want to," he said, barely above a whisper. Claire took a step back. "Don't say that unless you mean it. I can't let her get attached only to lose someone else. You don't get to just drop in and rewrite the ending." Graham looked at her, eyes red. "I lost my daughter too." The words dropped between them like a stone. Claire's breath caught. Her arms slowly unfolded. "Lily," he said. "She was 6. She liked snow angels and hated broccoli. She thought pianos could talk if you played them soft enough." He turned away from her, struggling for air. "I missed her last Christmas concert because of a merger meeting. Leah took her alone. The car never made it back." Claire stepped closer. "And since then, you've been running." He nodded once. "Until Ellie. Until you." She was silent for a long time, then sat beside him on the front pew. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the gentle tick of the radiator. Finally, Claire whispered, "She gave you a family in her mind before you even earned it." Graham looked down at his hands. "I don't know how to earn it." Claire's voice softened. "You don't earn it. You just choose it. and stay. He turned to her slowly. Can I still stay? She met his gaze. Her eyes shimmered with something tender and uncertain. I don't know, she said honestly. But maybe we can find out. They sat there as the candles flickered on the altar and snow fell outside, as silent and steady as forgiveness. The next morning, Willow Creek stirred beneath a thin veil of snow and a sky of quiet blue. Inside the church, the scent of fresh pine garland hung in the air, and the walls echoed with the muffled footsteps of children arriving early for rehearsal, their cheeks flushed from the cold. But something in the atmosphere had shifted, softened, and so had Graham. He arrived just after sunrise, not in his usual navy coat and gloves, but wearing a simple gray sweater and holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He found Claire adjusting angel wings on a wobbly costume rack near the altar. She looked up when he entered, brows raised. You remembered I like cinnamon? She asked. He held out the cup with a shy half-smile. I remembered. She took it, their fingers brushing briefly. No one said anything about what had happened the night before. Not yet. It was still too close, too raw, but the silence between them now held something gentler, like 2 people standing on the same side of a hard truth. Over the next hour, Graham moved through the building with quiet focus. He replaced the dying bulbs in the main chandelier. He restrung a garland that had sagged overnight. And when one of the folding chairs gave way under a chubby shepherd in training, Graham was already there with his toolbox and a reassuring hand. Claire watched him from across the room. He didn't seek credit, didn't insert himself, didn't try to explain. He simply stayed. Later that afternoon, Pastor Alice stepped into the rehearsal room, brushing snow from her scarf. A retired choir director herself, she had been watching everything unfold from a gentle distance, her sharp eyes catching more than most. Claire met her at the back of the sanctuary. He's been here every day, she said quietly. And not just showing up, being here. Pastor Alice smiled. Some people talk their way into our lives. Others fix light bulbs. Claire exhaled slowly. You think I'm being foolish? I think, the pastor said gently, that you're scared of building something real because the last time you did, it cracked. But sweetheart, what if this time it holds? Claire blinked against sudden tears. What if it doesn't? Then you rebuild. That's what faith is. Meanwhile, Ellie was sprawled across the choir room floor, coloring with her usual intensity. Graham sat nearby, watching her draw. She glanced up and smiled. Do you think snow is magic? She asked. Graham tilted his head. What makes you ask that? Because it hides everything ugly. The cracks in the sidewalk, the brown grass, the yucky stuff. She pressed a crayon hard against the page. And then everything looks clean again. Graham stared at her, heart twisting. Yeah, he whispered. I think snow is magic. She looked up at him, eyes wide. Are you staying for dinner tonight? He hesitated. Has your mom said anything? She made extra soup, Ellie said, proudly. That's mom code for please stay. He laughed softly. You're a very smart kid. I know, she said seriously, then added, So, will you stay? He looked down at her drawing. This time the 3 stick figures stood outside a house. His figure wore a red scarf. Yes, he said. I'll stay. That evening, Claire stood on her small porch, arms crossed, watching Graham nervously approach the steps holding a bag of bakery rolls and a bottle of sparkling cider. I come bearing peace offerings, he said. She smirked. Ellie told you about the soup, didn't she? She's a very persuasive negotiator. Inside, the cabin was simple but warm, walls lined with children's books and Christmas crafts, a string of mismatched lights twinkling across the windows. The soup was butternut squash, and Claire had baked cheesy biscuits that made the whole house smell like December. They sat at the table, the three of them, sharing stories between bites. Ellie chattered about choir songs and which shepherd costume had the scratchiest robe. Claire laughed more than she had in weeks, her face soft, unguarded. After Ellie was asleep, Graham helped gather the dishes. Claire lingered in the kitchen doorway. "She asks about you now," she said, her voice low. Graham turned to face her. "Not with words, but in the way she draws you into every picture. The way she listens for the door at rehearsal. The way she always sets 3 places at snack time." He swallowed. "And you?" Claire hesitated, then stepped forward. "I've been angry, not just at you, at the world, at myself. You had every right. But I also see you. Not just what you were, but who you're trying to be." He exhaled, slow. "I don't know if I can be enough." Claire looked up at him, eyes shining. "You already are to her." They stood there for a long moment, surrounded by the hush of a sleeping house, the ticking clock, the scent of cooling soup. Graham finally whispered, "I want to be more than a visitor." Claire's lips trembled, then formed a small smile. "Then come inside." His eyes softened. "I already am." The next morning, Claire found a surprise at the church. Every piano key had been tuned to perfect pitch. A string of warm bulbs had been installed around the risers, and 3 fresh boxes of children's choir robes sat stacked neatly by the coat rack, with a note in Graham's handwriting: "No more itchy shepherds." And that evening, as snow fell soft and slow outside, Ellie curled on Graham's lap with a storybook in hand. "You came back," she murmured sleepily. Graham kissed the top of her head. "I never really left." The sun dipped behind the trees earlier than usual on Christmas Eve, casting long lavender shadows over Willow Creek. By 5 o'clock, the church parking lot was already full, and soft, golden light spilled from the stained glass windows like warmth escaping into the cold. Inside, the sanctuary had transformed. Pine garlands twisted around wooden beams. Candles flickered in each window, their flames trembling with anticipation. A handmade banner stretched across the back wall in block letters that read, "Sing with joy." Backstage, children buzzed with excitement and nervous energy, adjusting halos, tightening belts, and whispering lines to each other like sacred secrets. Claire stood at the front of the choir, clipboard in hand, her golden hair pinned back in soft curls, a silver dress cascading to the floor. Her eyes moved across every detail, checking the mic, counting costumes, ensuring every snowflake and shepherd was accounted for. And then she saw him. Graham stood just off stage, half in shadow, adjusting the strap on Ellie's red velvet dress. His hands were gentle, his expression calm, but there was a tremor of emotion in the way he looked at the little girl before him, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. "Are you ready?" he whispered. Ellie nodded fiercely. "I'm not scared. Not even a little." "You're the bravest person I know," he said. "And you've got your whole choir behind you." Ellie beamed. "And you." He smiled. "Always me." Claire stepped over and touched his arm. "You look good," she said, meaning more than just the navy blazer and soft gray scarf. He gave her a quiet smile. "So do you." The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the sanctuary. Claire moved to the front and took her place behind the music stand. Her voice, clear and warm, addressed the waiting crowd. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for our annual Christmas Eve concert. This is more than a performance. It's a celebration of light, love, and the small voices that remind us of the biggest truths. She paused, her eyes searching the pews until they landed on Graham, seated now near the front. Ellie sat beside him, feet swinging, eyes wide. Claire continued, "This next piece was written by someone many of you know. It's a song about loss, but more than that, it's about what follows. It's about how love finds us even in the quietest places, even when we think it's gone." She nodded once. The music began. The children sang the first two numbers with joy that could have melted icicles. "Hark! The herald angels sing!" came with a few wrong notes and a tambourine too many, but no one minded. Parents leaned forward, wiping eyes, capturing shaky footage with their phones. And when Ellie stepped forward for her solo, the room seemed to hold its breath. She looked small on that stage, red velvet dress, a silver ribbon in her hair, her hands trembling just slightly. She searched the crowd with wide eyes. For a moment, her lips didn't move. But then, from the edge of the stage, Graham stepped into view. He didn't speak, just nodded once and mouthed the words, "Just sing for Mommy. I'm right here." Ellie took a deep breath, then sang, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Her voice wavered for the first few lines, but then steadied. It was small, pure, and so honest it ached. Each word floated through the sanctuary like a prayer wrapped in melody. Graham closed his eyes. Memories surged. Lily spinning in their living room, Leah singing while washing dishes, snow tapping at their windows. And then they softened. They didn't vanish, but they stopped hurting. Claire stood at the side of the piano, eyes glistening, hands clasped tight. "Please don't take my sunshine away." When Ellie's final note faded, there was a heartbeat of silence. Then thunderous applause. Some stood, some cried, some did both. Graham stood too, his chest full of something he hadn't dared name in years. Pride, love, belonging. Claire moved forward, gently guiding Ellie off stage as the children bowed. But Graham didn't return to his seat. Instead, he walked onto the stage, slowly, as the crowd began to quiet again. Claire, confused, turned toward him, brow furrowing, until she saw the small box in his hand. He bent to one knee, not in the center of the stage, but beside Ellie. The room gasped. Graham looked into Ellie's eyes and took her hand. "I lost everything once," he said, voice strong, clear. "I thought grief would be the end of me. I closed every door, pushed away every person who tried to love me. But this little girl," he squeezed her hand gently, "opened a door I thought was gone." He turned to Claire. "And you helped me find light again. You reminded me what music sounds like, what family feels like." Claire's lips parted in surprise, breath caught. "So tonight," he said, rising slowly, "in front of everyone who matters to you and to me, I want to ask, can we be family? Not just for now, not just through Christmas, but always." Ellie jumped up and down beside him. "Say yes, Mommy, say yes!" Laughter rippled through the room. Claire pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely now. She stepped forward, nodding through sobs. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The crowd erupted again. Applause, whistles, cheers. Someone in the back rang a bell. Graham wrapped his arms around both Claire and Ellie, holding them close on that candlelit stage, snow still falling beyond the windows, like something holy had entered the room. Later that night, The town square glowed with 1,000 tiny lights. Beneath the massive Christmas tree, the three of them stood hand in hand, watching children make snow angels in the field behind the church. "It looks like magic," Ellie said. Claire smiled. "It is, sweetheart." Graham looked at them both and whispered, "This time, I'm not going anywhere." And he didn't. Weeks later, Graham donated a second piano to the church, an upright with a plaque that simply read, "For Lily, who believed pianos could talk." Ellie drew a new picture. 3 people in front of a house, a dog in the yard, snowflakes overhead. The caption read, "Our family, forever." Because sometimes family isn't found in blood, but in bravery, in staying, in coming back, for good. If this story stirred something in your heart, if it reminded you that love often comes wrapped in the most unexpected moments, then we invite you to stay. Subscribe to Restoring Tales for more tales that touch your heart, heal your soul, and remind you that even on the hardest days, tomorrow is still a gift. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.